So we all know that feeling when you spent thousands of pounds on your latest e-bike, but when you've hit the trails, it sounds like you brought your nan's budgerigar along for the ride. Something's squeaking, something's knocking, you pull your brakes, they're squeaking, you're climbing the hills, your bars are clicking and creaking. Today we're going to be looking at some of the most common e-bike problems, those noises, and how we're going to rectify them. One of the biggest noises you probably experience on your e-bike is when you're hitting the downhill sections. There's a hell of a rattling going on from the back end. This is caused from chain slap. Basically, this chain is hitting this part of the metal. A lot of e-bikes now have a soft protector on the chainstay anyway, but if you are experiencing excessive noise, a really cheap way is finding an old piece of inner tube, getting that, literally wrapping it around the chainstay, a couple of zip ties on it, just put that down nice and tight, adding that extra bit of rubber and an extra bit of protection, because sometimes even though the factory fitted ones are on there, you will find that chain coming, there is unprotected bits, and you suffer a lot of paint damage from that whipping chain. It's also going to quieten down that ride a hell of a lot. Whilst you're at the back end of the bike, another one to check is that clutch in the rear mech. These things are really good if they're working perfectly, but they do become worn. If you've got a Shimano mech, just make sure that a little tab on the clutch is switched to on. Otherwise you will be experiencing a hell of a lot of noise from that mech rattling around on the descents. Another common problem is motor noise. If you're out on the trails and it sounds like you're using a Dyson vacuum cleaner, there's obviously something wrong with that motor. It's normally met with a lot of resistance on the cranks as well. So if you're feeling that resistance and motor noise combined, it's probably a good idea to get that bike back to the local bike shop ASAP. One of the most annoying creaks you can get is actually your bar and stem. It's this interface here. Basically this is torqued up nice and tight, but any dirt or a bit of looseness in those bolts can create a hell of an annoying creak. Especially when you're pulling on the bars uphill, you can hear it all the time. So if you are experiencing that horrible noise, clicking, cracking coming from this area, it's good to whip that front plate of the stem off, take the bolts out, give it a good clean, re-grease those bolts and torque them back up to the manufacturer's settings, and hopefully that annoying creak will disappear. Another one to look out for is spoke tension. If you've had your e-bike a little while, these wheels take a hell of a beating out on the trails with the weight of you and the bike combined. So it's really worth keeping an eye on this spoke tension. If you're experiencing like a ticking noise every single wheel revolution, you can hear it like tick, tick. It sounds like something's in your spoke every time. But it's actually these spokes clicking, sliding over one another, or it could be the nipples on the rim are loose as well. So it's worth just running your hand around that wheel before every ride, making sure that they all sound the same sort of noise and they all feel tight. If there is that little loose one, it will make a noise every time that wheel goes round, and it will do your head in. Your e-bike cockpit might look like a bit of a snake's nest with all these wires coming in everywhere. You've got motor controls, rear brake, dropper post, front brake, gear cables everywhere. A lot of new bikes are all internally routed, so it means that the cables are tucked nice away in the frame all the way through. But you might be experiencing that bit of cable rattle. So if it is internally routed, there isn't a lot you can do about this. The way I've got rid of most rattles on my bike is actually just feeding that cable through the frame a little bit, giving it a little shove and pull from the back. Sometimes it just gives that little cable a little bit more guidance through the frame and creates a bit more tighter runs. Also at the front you can get cables just tapping on your handlebars, which can do your head in as well. Easy way to rectify that, just add a little bit zip tie or tape together. Just obviously make sure those bars can easily move sort of 180 each way, not creating any tight spots before you hit the trails. A lot of e-bikes these days comes with plus size tyres. These tyres are huge, 2.8, 3 inches, stuff like that. But if you are going to be swapping those tyres around on your bike, you really need to check your manufacturer's specification on the widest tyre you can fit to that. If you don't, when you're giving that bike a hard time, especially through corners and whipping it around on jumps and things like that, you might be experiencing tyre buzz. This is basically where the tyre contacts either the chainstay or the seat stay and creates a hell of a noise in cornering. Also, if it does it enough, it can actually wear through your frame and create a real, bad stress point on that critical areas here. Also, if you're fitting too big of tyres, you might experience seat buzz as well, which seat buzz, basically when the suspension compresses, this comes down and actually buzzes the tyre. One thing it'll do is ruin the back of your seat and make a hell of a lot of noise, like you're farting as you're going through the trails. Another thing it can do in extreme circumstances is actually lock that back tyre up. If this is happening to you, the only way to rectify this is to either slide that saddle forward or just raise that saddle up a little bit. But tyre buzz in general is not a good thing to be having out there. There's one thing you take from this video, is keeping care of this little guy here. If you change, keep making sure that is lubed, cleaned after every ride. If it does become dry, rusty, it's going to create a hell of a lot of noise when you're out on the trail, let alone you're going to be missing out on power from your motor and you. Just remember, if you are riding in the summer, just to use a dry lube. If you're riding in the winter, use a wet lube too. But just be careful, try and use a dropper bottle, squirty bottle rather than a spray lube. Spray lube tends to drift and goes over that rear brake and will cause you a hell of a lot more problems out on the trail than a dry chain will. One of the main offenders when you're out on the trail making a lot of noise is this little fella here. It's linkage. And this is all full of bearings, bushes, and they can make a hell of a lot of noise if they're running dry or the bearings are in bad condition. If they are in bad condition, just take it down to your local bike shop. There's not a lot you can do with the cartridge bearings. You can press them in yourself, but unless you're very confident, I wouldn't advise it. And some manufacturers actually invalidate your warranty if you start messing with those bearings yourself, so just keep an eye out for that. I want to talk a little bit about brake noise as well. One of the most annoying noises you can get when you're out on the trails. If your front caliper or your rear caliper is misaligned and is slightly rubbing on that disc, you'll hear like a continuous ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching every wheel rotation. It really drives you mad. Easy way of rectifying this is just to undo these two 5mm Allen key bolts, might be T25 on different brake systems, but basically undo these, hold that brake lever whilst these are loose, and once that's centralised, just do them back up whilst holding the front brake or rear brake on. That should centralise that caliper. Then release the lever, and then hopefully that noise should disappear and those wheels will rotate without any noise. Another noise you might be experiencing is when you're pulling those brakes on, it sounds like you've got a pack of wolves chasing you, a real loud howling. This is often accompanied by really weak brake power. This means that the brake's contaminated. Somewhere along the line you've got oil or something nasty on your brake rotors and it's actually soaked into those brake pads. So you experience that horrible brake noise, low power. Unfortunately, it's time to chuck those pads in the bin, wipe that rotor around nice and clean, get a set of new fresh brake pads in there. Hopefully that noise will disappear. Obviously just check you haven't got a leak anywhere on the system, because if your pistons are leaking, you're going to contaminate these pads straight away again. Really common one is actually over lubing on the chain like we talked about earlier. A good thing to do before each ride is to have a quick whip around on all the bolts on your e-bike. Common problem areas I found are chainring bolts, rear axle, rear mech, seat, and just check every single bolt literally before you hit the trails, because remember, any loose bolts can create a horrible rattle and could lead to something falling off your bike on the ride, something you don't want. When you're out on the trails on your e-bike, you're probably going to find yourself in the saddle a hell of a lot more than you would do on a regular bike. Thing is, this is only two little bolts holding this on, and it's directly in the firing line of all that debris and dust and stuff off your back wheel, so it's a nasty place to be on the bike. If you're experiencing every time you pedal a horrible creak coming from underneath you, it's probably going to be your saddle or your saddle clamp as well. Not a lot you can do to rectify this. You can try tightening that up, but I guarantee you that noise will come back. Best bet is to get home, strip that down, give it a good clean, lube those bolts up, crank them back up to the manufacturer's torque setting, and I guarantee that noise will go away. So I really hope you've enjoyed today's video on how to silence your e-bike. Hopefully those squeaks, rattles will have all gone away. You won't be scaring away all the local wildlife out on your rides too. Don't forget, if you liked this video today, be sure to check out how to personalize your e-bike up here. Also, a recent epic ride I did with Steve Gill where we used Google Maps to check out like all these hidden spots. Really good video here. Don't forget to drop us some comments below, give us a thumbs up if you like the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.